Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Bahrainis hold mass anti-regime march as Iraq rallies in solidarity. Syrian opposition displays loyalty to Kurds while Assad loyalists gather in Damascus. And the U.S. agrees to hand over Bagram prison to Afghans. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
A massive demonstration was held near the Bahraini capital al-Manama in response to a call by religious scholar Ayatollah Sheikh Isa Qasim, launched after Bahraini King Hamad bin Isa accused protesters of being a minority. The demonstrations also coincide with the anniversary of the occupation of Bahrain by Saudi forces and their participation in the crackdown on protesters. It was the first time Sheikh Isa Qasim participated in these demonstrations.
Over 1 year after it was launched, leaders of the revolution and the Bahraini opposition confirmed their revolution is still alive and active, and that it is still able to face the suppression campaigns and challenges regardless of their magnitude. A single unified mass demonstration took place near the capital, al-Manama, to prove that point. It was organized in response to a call by religious scholar Ayatollah Sheikh Isa Qasim. Sheikh Qasim invited all people to participate in these marches, stressing on the demands for reform and basic liberties, as well as an end to the repression. And during Friday prayers at the mosque of al-Imam al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, in al-Diraz, near the capital al-Manama, Sheikh Qasim directed his speech to all social classes of the country. He called on them to prove they have not abandoned their demands and that their presence in the march takes precedence over class, party, and sectarian affiliations.
Today, God willing, your march, the march of the people and its masses, will prove that despite our different affiliations and alliances and leaderships and social classes, that we have not abandoned our demands. All these masses will say that there will be no retreat from our demands and no compromise. They will not be neglected, and we will not leave the squares until attaining our demands.
And in fact, many organizations, opposition political societies active in the country, and many religious leaders, intellectuals, and social figures announced their endorsement of Sheikh Isa Qasim's call. They participated in the demonstration despite the authorities' use of all their tools and faced protesters with steel, fire, and poisonous gas.
The government in Bahrain today is not a rule of one people by another. It is also not the rule of one sect by another. The people of this country, with all their components, have no choice but to look at each other with the same outlook, that of a people with equal citizenship.
Sheikh Qasim's call was not merely meant to display the power of the people and their tremendous potential to continue their peaceful protests, but he also wanted to teach the authorities a lesson. He did so by responding to King Hamad bin Isa's accusations that protesters are a minority in the country. Observers say the people's mass engagement with Sheikh Qasim's call and the quick answer to his invitation changes the political equation in the country. It does not seem the authorities will be able to easily contain it despite using systematic oppressive measures for over a year. More than 60 people were martyred in the crackdown in the past 13 months. However, the Al-Khalifa family has been insisting on holding on to the reins of power for the last 200 years. The king's uncle, Khalifa bin Salman al-Khalifa, has been prime minister for over 40 years, and he is considered the longest-serving prime minister in the world.
Meanwhile, people have taken to the streets in several Iraqi cities in solidarity with the ongoing revolution in Bahrain. Rallies have been held in the capital Baghdad and a number of other cities, including the holy city of Najaf. Demonstrators chanted slogans in support of the Bahraini people. They condemned Bahrain's al-Khalifa regime for its Saudi-backed crackdown on opposition protests since they started in February 2011. The Iraqi demonstrators also condemned Saudi Arabia for what they called interference in Bahrain. They demanded an end to the ongoing deadly crackdown on Bahrainis. They also called for a stop to what they described as the Saudi occupation of the small kingdom. Bahraini activists have released pictures showing U.S. soldiers training Bahraini soldiers and police. The photos show Bahraini troops in military planes with American soldiers. Other photos show U.S. troops posing with Bahraini police and army men. Some of the pictures were taken inside Bahrain, others in unknown locations. Activists say that the U.S., along with Britain, support the government of Bahrain. They say that Washington and London send weapons, logistics, and training support to the Bahraini regime. The activists say this is to intentionally crush their movement. In Saudi Arabia, protests have erupted in the oil-rich eastern province. Demonstrators in the town of Rabia near the main Qatif city have taken to the streets shouting slogans against the government. They were also out to show solidarity with the ongoing revolution in neighboring Bahrain. The protesters came out to commemorate the deaths of all those killed by Saudi forces since last year. Since November, 7 people have been killed and scores of others injured or detained. Protesters in Saudi Arabia began their uprising in March of 2011. They were inspired by the revolutions across the Middle East and North Africa. Meanwhile, Syrian demonstrators have once again rallied in the capital Damascus to voice their support for President Bashar al-Assad.
نحن اليوم شباب وصبايا سوريا نازلين لنأيد رئيسنا دكتور بشار الأسد ونكون معه ونكون مع الجيش اللي هو كمان بالطرقات وعم يحمي البلد ونحن كمان عم ننزل نهار عطلة وبلا أي حدا ما ينزلنا غصبا عنا نحن عم ننزل نأيد الجيش تبعنا ونقول له نحن معك والله يحميكم والله يحمي سوريا.
Raising the Syrian flag and posters of Bashar al-Assad, demonstrators reaffirmed their unity in the face of foreign plots. They also rejected foreign interference in their country's internal affairs and stressed that only a Syrian solution for the country's months-long crisis would be accepted. The pro-Assad demonstrators also thanked the countries that have stood by them in their times of hardship.
We are here to supporting the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and Syrian army and to say thank you to Russia and China and all real freedom country, and we want to say to Kofi Annan, please say the truth.
Today in Syria, Friday protests were held under the slogan "Loyalty to the Kurdish Uprising," in reference to the uprising that erupted in al-Qamishli in March 2004 against the Syrian authorities. Opposition says the authorities at the time crushed the uprising after killing nearly 50 people who took part in it. Today's demonstration directly addressed the Kurds, sending them many messages holding unclear implications. While some viewed the demonstration as honoring the Kurds' role in the recent protests, others believed it aimed at placating the Kurds amid reports that they are distancing themselves from the opposition. More details in the following report.
The Kurdish community has been a controversial element in the popular mobilization and crisis Syria has been witnessing for over 11 months. The mostly Kurdish eastern areas were relied upon as a force to push forward the popular mobilization in Syria. However, developments proved the supposed power of a force that's traditionally opposed the Damascus regime is not ready to play a role in a national movement. Historically, Kurds in Syria and neighboring countries represented a potential threat to the geographical unity of these countries. In Syria, Kurds have been a constant target by successive Syrian governments seeking to dominate them. The different Kurdish uprisings in modern Syrian history have not succeeded in achieving the Kurds' pressing demands. Their most essential request is for Syrian citizenship, which Kurds have been deprived of for a long time, as well as demands for basic civil rights. Hundreds of thousands of Kurds were barred from voting, owning property, and holding sensitive positions in the public sector. In March of 2011, what has since been named Syria's Spring was launched. The Kurds were one of the most important components of the peaceful mobilization. The internal opposition parties waited for the Kurds to expand their participation in what they agreed to call Syria's uprising, with the aim of increasing the pressure on the regime in Damascus. However, the developments and disputes within the Syrian opposition caused the Syrian movement to lose one of its most important elements, after the Kurdish representation in the Syrian National Council was limited to parties that do not represent the Kurdish street. Meanwhile, the Syrian authorities managed to contain their disputes with the Kurds, and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad issued a number of decrees, including some that met the Kurds' general demands, most importantly granting them Syrian citizenship. A number of observers believe the Syrian opposition's close relationship to Ankara weakened its ability to regain the Kurdish community, causing Kurds to lose their trust in the Syrian opposition. The head of the Syrian National Council, Burhan Khalioun's visit to Iraq at the beginning of the year did not succeed in convincing the president of Iraqi Kurdistan region, Masoud al-Barzani, to ask Syrian Kurds to contribute to the Syrian uprising. The Syrian Kurdish National Congress convened 2 months ago in Arbil and ended with an understanding to ask Syrian Kurds to unite their front and to set up the nation's interests as the top priority of Kurdish political work. The Friday of Loyalty to the Kurdish uprising was held to address the sentiments of the Kurds and to seek their participation in the events in Syria. Meanwhile, the Syrian opposition seems unable to draw a clear strategy to confront the regime in Damascus and looks unqualified to conduct a constructive dialogue with Syrian authorities.
In Afghanistan, Washington and Kabul signed a memorandum of understanding today to transfer the administration of Bagram prison from U.S. forces to Afghan authorities. This comes after Afghan President Hamid Karzai asked the U.S. on 2 occasions to hand over control of the detention center to the Afghan government.
The Bagram air base is located nearly 60 kilometers north of Kabul, where the U.S. runs the Bagram prison by virtue of leading the international forces in Afghanistan. Within 6 months, the prison will be completely controlled by the Afghan authorities in accordance with the provisions of the Memorandum of Understanding signed between Washington and Kabul today. The deal was reached between Western and Afghan officials in the past several hours, shortly before the March 10th deadline, which included the Afghan president's second request to the United States to fully hand over the Bagram facility to Kabul.
This is an important step.
This is an important step in the strategic partnership negotiations, and very much in keeping with both the Loya Jirga's recommendations and the desires of President Hamid Karzai.
With the signing of this agreement and after ending issues related to the special operations, Afghan conditions would have effectively been met, and a foundation would have been established to sign a strategic cooperation agreement between the 2 countries.
In January, Karzai sent the first request to the United States to transfer control of the detention center to the Afghan government. Then, Kabul released a report on the torture and abuse in Bagram prison, especially in the departments administered by the U.S. forces, in addition to recording cases of detainees who remained in custody after proving their innocence or completing their sentences. The report also recorded a number of violations of human rights treaties and the Afghan constitution, such as maintaining the administration of prisons in the hands of foreign forces. Observers of Afghan affairs believe that Karzai's request to Washington to fully hand over Bagram prison proves the president objects to Washington's strategy of negotiating with the Taliban to establish peace in the country. Bagram holds at least 3,000 detainees, mostly Taliban members, and is referred to by some as the Afghan Guantanamo. It is considered by many Afghans to be a symbol of U.S. occupation. The issue of Bagram prison recently resurfaced when U.S. soldiers burned copies of the Quran there, leading to a wave of protests in the country that left a number of people killed.
Within 1 hour, Israel targeted the Gaza Strip twice. A short while ago, Israeli fighters carried out a raid on the neighborhood of al-Shajaya, killing 2 Palestinians whose identities have yet to be released.
Prior to that incident, Israeli missiles killed the Secretary General of the Popular Resistance Committees, Zuhair al-Qaisi, and senior leader Mahmoud Hanani in a strike on their car.
The committees threatened to respond. The occupation army, which admitted to assassinating the 2 Palestinian activists, held Hamas responsible for any escalation along the Gaza Strip's border. Hamas condemned the aggression and called on the international community to intervene and help contain the situation. Bassam al-Madhoun reports from Gaza.
The Secretary General of the Popular Resistance Committee, Zuhair al-Qaisi, and senior leader Mahmoud Hanani were martyred in an airstrike targeting a civilian car west of Gaza City. This is the second time in a year that the Secretary General of the Popular Resistance Committees has been assassinated.
The response will be greater than what's being announced by the enemy. We will continue the resistance on the path of jihad. We will not sacrifice our leaders and martyrs for the sake of a worthless truce. From now on, there will be no limit to the response of the al-Nasser Salah al-Din brigades. The brigades will decide in the next few hours how to respond to the occupation.
Israel, which admitted to targeting al-Qaisi, claimed the raid was aimed at preventing an operation that was being planned by al-Nasser Salah al-Din brigades along the Israeli-Egyptian border. The Palestinian factions, most notably the Hamas movement, condemned the attack and demanded that the international community mount pressure on Israel to help prevent an escalation.
We warn the Zionist occupation and hold it fully responsible for this crime and any implications that may follow. We call on all relevant sides to help end the aggression and restrain the occupation, which continues every now and then to commit violations and abuses against our Palestinian people.
With the fall of a resistance leader, the scene becomes more uncertain and opens the door to further escalation, as confirmed by observers. With the return of the assassination policy adopted by Israel, several options come to light, most notably the tit-for-tat retaliation policy, which may further complicate the scene. Bassam al-Madhoun, Dubai TV, the Gaza Strip.
Amid a wave of indignation, residents in the West Bank city of Hebron held a funeral procession for Zakaria Abu Aram, a Palestinian youth killed yesterday by the occupation soldiers.
Hundreds of mourners took part in the procession and marched in the streets of the village of Yatta, condemning the murder of the 17-year-old youth. Abu Aram was murdered from a single bullet to the head during clashes with an Israeli army unit that stormed the village in an attempt to arrest Khaled Mukamira, who was released in the Shalit prisoners swap deal. In addition, an Israeli soldier and 2 Palestinian youths were injured in the confrontation.
Former head of the Mossad intelligence agency, Meir Dagan, has spoken out again, declaring that the time is not right to launch a military strike against Iran. Dagan sparked controversy last year when he dismissed a potential Israeli airstrike as silly and disadvantageous. In his first interview with an American media outlet, Dagan told Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes that he believes Tehran is currently exercising caution out of concern over a possible military intervention.
You have said publicly that bombing Iran now is the stupidest idea you've ever heard. That's a direct quote.
An attack on Iran before you exploring all other approaches is not the right way how to do it.
The dispute seems to come down, though, to whether you are at the end of everything that you can try, or whether you have a lot of time left to try other things, which seems to be your position.
I never said that it's a lot of time, but I think that...
Well, more time.
More time.
For nearly a decade, buying more time was his job. The Iranians say Dagan dispatched assassins, faulty equipment, and computer viruses to sabotage their nuclear program. All the while, he was poring over the most secret dossiers about the Iranian regime, gaining insights and a surprising appreciation.
The regime in Iran is a very rational regime.
Do you think Ahmadinejad is rational?
The answer is yes. Not exactly our rationale, but I think that he is rational.
Do you think they're rational enough that they are capable of backing down from this?
No doubt that the Iranian regime is maybe not exactly rational based on what I call Western thinking. But no doubt that they are considering all the implications of their action.
President Shimon Peres is continuing his own mission to the United States, where he is focused on shoring up greater support for Israel's interests. Speaking at a forum in Beverly Hills last night, Peres again stressed that a nuclear Iran poses a grave threat to the world.
The President made it clear that he will not compromise on the issue of Iran. It's a danger to all of the world, not just to Israel. And I think while everybody is looking for differences, the basis is common and agreed by the two parties, by the American people, by the leaders of the entire world. They cannot support, they shouldn't, to see an Iranian government that threatens to destroy another country, which is the center of terror, trying to get a bomb in the most irresponsible hands with a morally corrupted group of leaders.
New TV takes another journey to Yemen, and my colleague Gadi Francis meets with the father of a former al-Qaeda leader in Abyan province. More secrets are revealed in New TV's exclusive report, Al-Qaeda Made Public.
This picture summarizes the reality of Yemen's rising generation. They are fearless and have no worries. In the past, they fought in Beirut for Palestine, and with bin Laden in Afghanistan and Iraq, they run towards death, and they seek it when fighting for their cause. Their enthusiasm is ready to be put to use. On southern Yemen's rubble, the socialist man became a bereaved father grieving for a son killed at just 26. 2 years ago, he received the news of his son Jamil's death, caused by 2 stab wounds to the back. His deceased son was the commander of al-Qaeda in Abyan province.
The leader who memorized God's holy book, Jamil al-Anbari, is a native of Aden Abyan. The nation anxiously awaits the arrival of Abyan's knights to liberate them from the oppressors.
He was fatally struck by Americans with the complicity of the Yemeni government. After completing his studies and failing to find a job, he traveled to Sada, where he enrolled in a Salafi institute run by Sheikh Miqbal. He visited Sada several times against my will. I even beat him once. Society does influence people in certain ways. Then he traveled to the al-Mudi region of Abyan province, where he interacted with reformist groups, including reformists loyal to the regime. It seemed like their religious ideologies conflicted.
Within the ranks of the Yemeni Authority, there's a political wing that's more powerful than that of Ali Abdullah Saleh. It is Ali Mohsen al-Ahmar's wing. The group holds a mixture of Islamic and tribal elements and supports Muslim Brotherhood parties and al-Qaeda. Members of this group are spread across the country and well established inside the regime and the opposition, whose mask has recently unfolded. They sent Jamil to fight in Iraq in 2005 and inaugurated him as the group's emir or commander when he returned, leaving his leftist southern father in distress over his country, son, and cause.
He spent a year in jail as a political and security prisoner under the pretext of engaging in political activity. They never questioned me about Jamil. I believe that Jamil refused to carry out orders by the leaders of the regime.
So you think they killed him because he refused
Of course, the threat of the Houthis and al-Qaeda is a fabrication by Ali Abdullah Saleh, no one else. Even now, I believe that after this crisis, there are people who joined al-Qaeda because they want to acquire weapons or secure food or for other financial reasons. But this has nothing to do with religion or al-Qaeda's ideology.
They burned his body just as they burned the body of Tariq al-Tahab, who entered the city of Rada as the commander of Ansar al-Sharia group. They did the same to Anwar al-Awlaki, bin Laden's American right-hand intelligence man. In Yemen, forces, groups, and hearts are exploited for regional and international conflicts.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.